France begins with a promise. Not the cliché of baguettes and berets, but something deeper. The promise that beauty matters, that pleasure is worthwhile, that civilization means more than simply surviving. It's a country where cheese is protected by law, where wine has appellations as precise as maps, where sitting at a cafe for hours is not laziness, but philosophy. Roughly the size of Texas, France packs extraordinary diversity into its hexagonal borders. Alpine peaks in the east touch the sky at over 4,800 metres. Mediterranean beaches line the south. Atlantic waves crash on western cliffs. In between, rivers carve valleys through limestone. Volcanic peaks rise from ancient plateaus, and forests cover hills that have witnessed every chapter of European history. What makes France distinct is not just geography, but how deeply the French have cultivated their relationship with it. Every region has its own identity, its own food, sometimes its own language. A person from Brittany feels as different from someone in Provence as nations apart, yet both are unmistakably French. This is a country that turned cooking into haute cuisine, wine into an art form, and fashion into an export more valuable than most nations' economies. Yet it's also a country of farmers and fishermen, of villages that have changed little in centuries, of traditions maintained not from nostalgia but from genuine belief that some things shouldn't be rushed or modernised. The story begins where France itself centres, in the city that needs no introduction. Paris sits in a natural basin carved by the Seine, a river that loops through the city like a lazy question mark. The location made sense strategically. The Ile de la Cité, the island in the Seine's centre, provided a defensible position where Celtic tribes first settled over 2,000 years ago. The Romans built Lutetia here. Medieval kings made it their capital, and over centuries, Paris grew outward in concentric circles, each era leaving its architectural signature. The city's most recognizable structure, the Eiffel Tower, was temporary. Built for the 1889 World's Fair, it was supposed to stand for 20 years before being dismantled. Parisians hated it initially, calling it an eyesore, a metal skeleton ruining their skyline. Writer Guy de Maupassant allegedly ate lunch at its restaurant daily because it was the only place in Paris where he couldn't see the tower. Yet it endured. At 330 metres, it remained the world's tallest structure until 1930. Engineer Gustave Eiffel designed it not just as a monument but as a scientific instrument, using it for experiments in aerodynamics, radio transmission and meteorology. Now over 7 million people visit it annually, riding elevators to viewing platforms that offer perspectives across the city's rooftops, the Seine snaking below, the Arc de Triomphe visible in one direction, Sacré-Cœur's white domes in another. Notre Dame Cathedral on the Ile de la Cité embodies Gothic architecture at its finest. Construction began in 1163 and took nearly 200 years to complete. Flying buttresses support walls that seem too thin to hold the weight above them. Stained glass windows, including the massive rose windows, filter light into colours that shift throughout the day. Gargoyles lean from the roof, water spouts disguised as demons and fantastic creatures. The 2019 fire that destroyed the spire and much of the roof devastated not just Paris, but the world. The cathedral had survived the French Revolution, when revolutionaries vandalised it and repurposed it as a temple of reason, 2 world wars and 800 years of weather. Watching it burn felt like witnessing history itself threatened. Restoration continues, with reopening planned for late 2024, though the work will extend for years beyond. The burned oak beams, some dating to the 13th century, are being replaced with new oak from French forests, maintaining traditional building techniques. The Louvre, originally a medieval fortress, then a royal palace, became a museum during the French Revolution when the new government declared that art belonged to the people, not the monarchy. It's now the world's most visited museum, holding nearly 40,000 works on display and hundreds of thousands more in storage. The Mona Lisa draws crowds so thick that seeing Leonardo's actual painting requires pushing through dozens of people, cameras held overhead, capturing a moment with art they can barely see. The painting itself is surprisingly small, just 77 by 53 centimetres, protected behind bulletproof glass after a series of attacks and theft attempts over the decades. The glass pyramid entrance, added in 1989 and initially controversial, has become iconic in its own right. Designed by I.M. Pei, it provides natural light to the underground lobby while creating a striking contrast with the classical architecture surrounding it. Montmartre, the hill on Paris's northern edge, maintains a village atmosphere despite being fully within the city. Narrow streets climb steeply toward the Sacré-Cœur Basilica, its white Romano-Byzantine domes visible across Paris. Built beginning in 1875, the basilica sits at the highest point in the city, 130 metres above sea level. Artists set up easels in Place du Tertre, painting portraits and cityscapes. The Moulin Rouge, the iconic cabaret with its red windmill, still operates, though its clientele is now mostly tourists rather than the bohemian artists and writers who frequented it in the late 19th century, when Toulouse-Lautrec immortalised its dancers in posters. The Père Lachaise Cemetery in eastern Paris is the final resting place of Chopin, Oscar Wilde, Edith Piaf, and Jim Morrison, among thousands of others. It's less morbid than it sounds, more like a sculpture park where history is recorded in stone. People leave lipstick kisses on Wilde's tomb and flowers on Morrison's grave, maintaining rituals that connect the living to the dead. Paris's cafe culture is not decoration but essential infrastructure. Cafes line every street, small round tables spilling onto sidewalks. People sit for hours over a single coffee or glass of wine, watching the city pass. It's social theatre and solitary contemplation simultaneously. The waiter won't rush you. The table is yours as long as you want it. In a city that moves fast, the cafe is where time slows. The city's boulangeries, bakeries maintain standards enforced by tradition and competition. A proper baguette must weigh 250 grams, measure 65 centimetres, and have a golden crust that crackles when squeezed. Croissants should be buttery, flaky, and never sweet. These aren't mere preferences, but matters of civic pride. Annual competitions determine the city's best baguette, and the winner earns the honour of supplying bread to the Élysée Palace for a year. Southwest of Paris, the Loire Valley stretches along France's longest river, a region of chateaux that served as royal playgrounds. These aren't medieval fortresses, but Renaissance palaces, built not for defence but for pleasure. Kings and nobles commissioned them as hunting lodges and country estates, places to escape Paris's political intrigues while displaying wealth and taste. Château de Chambord is the largest and most ambitious. Commissioned by King Francois I in the early 16th century, it contains 440 rooms, 282 fireplaces, and 84 staircases. The double helix staircase, allegedly designed by Leonardo da Vinci, is an architectural marvel. Two people can ascend or descend simultaneously without ever meeting, the staircases intertwining but never intersecting. The design demonstrates mathematical precision and serves no practical purpose beyond impressing visitors, which it continues to do 500 years later. The chateau was rarely used. Francois visited only 72 days during his entire reign. It was too big, too expensive to heat, too impractical. Louis XIV stayed longer, using it as a hunting lodge, but even he found it uncomfortable. But practicality wasn't the point. Chambord was a statement, architecture as power projection, a declaration that the French monarchy commanded resources beyond imagination. Château de Chenonceau, built across the Cher River on a series of arches, is more elegant, more intimate. Known as the Château des Dames because women shaped its history. It passed through the hands of several influential women, including Diane de Poitiers, King Henri II's mistress, and Catherine de Medici, his wife, who forced Diane to exchange it for another chateau after Henri's death. The gallery spanning the river, with its black and white checkered floor and windows on both sides, is one of France's most photographed rooms. During World War I, it served as a military hospital. During World War II, the river marked the boundary between occupied and free France, making the gallery technically a border crossing. Château d'Amboise, overlooking the Loire, was a royal residence where Leonardo da Vinci spent his final years. Francois I invited him to France in 1516, giving him the nearby Château du Clos Lucé and a generous pension. Leonardo brought 3 paintings with him, including the Mona Lisa, which he continued to work on until his death in 1519. He's buried in the chapel at Amboise, though the exact location of his remains was lost during the French Revolution when the chapel was damaged. The Loire Valley produces wine, though it's less famous than Bordeaux or Burgundy. The region specialises in whites, particularly Sancerre and Pouilly-Fumé, crisp wines from Sauvignon Blanc, grapes grown on limestone and flint soils. The valley's mild climate and the river's moderating influence create ideal conditions, and vineyards cover the hillsides, their neat rows following the river's curves. Vouvray produces Chenin Blanc wines that range from dry to sweet, some sparkling, reflecting the versatility of the grape and the winemaker's choices. South from the Loire, the landscape changes, becoming drier, hotter, more Mediterranean. Provence, in southeastern France, is where French clichés come closest to reality. Lavender fields really do stretch purple to the horizon, at least in July, when the plants bloom and are harvested. The scent is overwhelming, sweet and herbal, carried on warm winds. Hilltop villages really do have stone houses with terracotta roofs, clustered around church steeples. Markets really do overflow with fresh produce, cheese, and olives. The region's light attracted artists. Van Gogh painted some of his most famous works in Arles and Saint-Rémy de Provence, the bright colours and intense sun influencing his palette. He created over 300 paintings and drawings during his 15 months in the region, including The Starry Night, Sunflowers and Bedroom in Arles. His mental health deteriorated here, leading to the incident where he cut off part of his ear, and he eventually admitted himself to an asylum in Saint-Rémy, where he continued painting. Cézanne, born in Aix-en-Provence, spent years painting Mont-Saint-Victoire, the limestone mountain that dominates the landscape east of the city, capturing it in dozens of canvases that progressively abstracted its form. He walked the same paths repeatedly, observing how light changed the mountain's appearance, seeking to capture not just what it looked like, but its essential structure. Gordes, perched on a cliff edge, is one of Provence's most beautiful villages. Stone buildings cascade down the hillside, their beige walls blending with the rock beneath. The village looks ancient because it is. Its foundations dating to the 11th century, though most current structures date from the Renaissance, when the village was rebuilt after wars destroyed it. Below, the Senanque Abbey sits in a valley, a 12th century Cistercian monastery, still home to the monks who live according to the rule of St. Benedict, balancing prayer, work and rest. In summer, lavender fields surround the abbey, the purple flowers contrasting with the abbey's pale stone, creating an image that appears on countless postcards and travel posters. The Pont de Gare, near Nîmes, is a Roman aqueduct built in the 1st century AD to carry water to the city from springs 50 kilometres away. The three-tiered bridge stands 48 metres high, its arches spanning the Garden River. It's a masterpiece of Roman engineering, built without mortar, the limestone blocks held together by precise cutting and iron clamps. The aqueduct operated for 500 years before falling into disuse, but the bridge remained, used by locals to cross the river. Today, it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, drawing visitors who marvel at Roman ingenuity. The Verdun Gorge, Europe's deepest canyon, cuts through the limestone plateau north of Provence. The Verdun River, turquoise from glacial minerals and limestone sediment, flows through a canyon reaching depths of 700 metres. The Grand Canyon du Verdun, as it's called, draws kayakers who navigate rapids in the narrow gorge, rock climbers who scale the vertical limestone walls, and tourists who drive the cliff-edge roads, stopping at viewpoints to peer into the gorge below, where the river appears as a thin blue thread. Further east, the coast curves toward Italy, the French Riviera beginning where the Alps meet the sea. Nice, the Riviera's largest city, has been a resort destination since the 18th century when British aristocrats began wintering here, escaping London's cold and damp. The Promenade des Anglais, the seafront walkway named for those English visitors, stretches along the Baie des Anges, a pebble beach that's rarely empty. The water is impossibly blue, Mediterranean clarity allowing you to see the bottom even in deep water. The promenade itself is wide, palm trees lining one side, hotels and apartments on the other, and it serves as the city's social space where people walk, jog, cycle, or simply sit watching the sea. The old town, Vieux-Nice, is a maze of narrow streets painted in shades of yellow and orange. Markets sell flowers, vegetables, and Niçoise specialties like soccer, a chickpea flour pancake cooked in large pans over wood fires and served with black pepper. The food here reflects proximity to Italy. Pizza is common. Pasta appears on most menus. Salade niçoise, the region's most famous dish, combines tuna, hard-boiled eggs, anchovies, tomatoes and olives, a meal that tastes of sun and sea. Monaco, technically an independent principality, sits squeezed between Nice and the Italian border. It's the world's second smallest country, barely 2 square kilometres, yet it packs in a casino. A Grand Prix circuit that winds through city streets and more millionaires per capita than anywhere else. The wealth is conspicuous. Yachts filling the harbour, some so large they carry smaller boats and helicopters. Luxury cars navigate streets too narrow for them, Ferraris and Lamborghinis inching through traffic. It's absurd and fascinating, a city-state where tax laws have created a haven for the wealthy who can afford the astronomical real estate prices. Cannes, west along the coast, is famous for its film festival. 2 weeks in May when celebrities flood the city and photographers mob the red carpet at the Palais des Festivals. Winners of the Palme d'Or join cinema's elite, the award carrying prestige that can make careers. The rest of the year, it's a more relaxed resort town. Beaches and boutiques catering to tourists who come for sun rather than cinema. The Croisette, the beachfront boulevard, is lined with luxury hotels and designer shops, prices rising with proximity to the water. Antibes, between Nice and Cannes, maintains a more authentic character. The old town, surrounded by 16th century ramparts built to defend against pirates, contains narrow streets and a daily market. The Picasso Museum in the Châteaux Grimaldi, where Picasso worked for several months in 1946, holds works he created there, paintings and ceramics that reflect his joy at being on the Mediterranean after years in occupied Paris. North from the Riviera, the Alps rise sharply, peaks reaching over 4,000 metres. Mont Blanc, Western Europe's highest mountain at 4,808 metres, straddles the French-Italian border. The mountain is massive, a dome of ice and rock visible from dozens of kilometres away. Climbing it requires experience, acclimatisation and luck with weather. The normal route, though not technically difficult by alpine standards, is long and exposed, crossing glaciers where crevasses hide under snow bridges. Dozens attempt it daily during summer, starting from Chamonix, the alpine town at its base. Many turn back, defeated by altitude, weather, or exhaustion. Chamonix itself is an outdoor sports capital. In winter, it's skiing, some of the most challenging terrain in Europe, accessed by cable cars that carry skiers to altitudes where oxygen thins and where one wrong turn can lead to deadly consequences. The Vallée Blanche, a 20-kilometre off-piste descent. Begins at 3,842 metres and drops over 2,800 metres through spectacular glacier scenery. It's not for beginners, crevasses and seracs, threatening those who stray from the route. In summer, it's mountaineering, hiking and paragliding. The Aiguille du Midi cable car climbs to 3,842 metres in just 20 minutes, offering views across Mont Blanc and the surrounding peaks. Standing on the viewing platform, the peaks stretch in every direction, glacier-covered and pristine. The air is thin, the temperature cold even in August, and the drop below is dizzying, vertical rock faces falling thousands of meters. The Tour du Mont Blanc, a hiking trail that circles the mountain through France, Italy and Switzerland, takes about 11 days to complete. The route covers roughly 170 kilometres, crosses multiple high passes, some exceeding 2,500 metres, and visits mountain villages where hikers sleep in refuges, sharing meals with others walking the same path. It's one of Europe's classic long-distance treks, challenging but accessible to anyone with reasonable fitness and determination. Further west, the landscape drops to lower mountains, the Massif Central, an ancient volcanic region where the Auvergne province preserves rural French traditions. The Puy de Dôme, a volcanic dome that rises 1,465 metres, dominates the landscape near Clermont-Ferrand. A train now carries tourists to the summit, where the views stretch across dozens of other volcanic peaks, their perfect cone shapes unmistakable. These volcanoes last erupted thousands of years ago, but their forms remain, preserved by the dry climate and resistant basalt. The Chaîne des Puys, the chain of volcanoes, numbers over 80 distinct peaks, creating a landscape that's unique in France, neither alpine nor coastal, but distinctly volcanic. North from the Massif Central, the landscape flattens into agricultural plains, the Paris Basin stretching toward the English Channel. Normandy on the northern coast is where history and landscape intersect dramatically. Mont-Saint-Michel, an island commune, sits on a tidal flat where the difference between high and low tide can exceed 14 metres, among the highest tides in Europe. At high tide, the island is surrounded by water, accessible only by a modern bridge that replaced the old causeway. At low tide, the water recedes kilometres, exposing mudflats and sand, where the unwary can become trapped as the tide returns with surprising speed. The abbey, built on the island's rocky peak, dates to the 8th century when, according to legend, the Archangel Michael appeared to the Bishop of Avranches and commanded him to build a church here. The current structure mostly dates from the 11th to 16th centuries, a Gothic masterpiece rising improbably from a small island, barely 600 metres in circumference. Narrow streets wind up from the entrance gate, lined with shops and restaurants catering to tourists, climbing toward the abbey at the top. The Grande Rue, the main street, has hosted pilgrims for over 1,000 years, though the souvenir shops are more recent additions. Tourism has transformed Mont-Saint-Michel. Over 3 million people visit annually, and the island feels more like a theme park than a religious site, though monks still live in the abbey, maintaining a spiritual presence amid the crowds. Early morning or late evening, when day trippers have left, the island regains some of its medieval atmosphere, its silhouette against the sky unchanged since the Middle Ages. The D-Day beaches stretch along Normandy's coast, sites where Allied forces landed on June 6, 1944, beginning the liberation of Western Europe from Nazi occupation. Omaha Beach, Utah Beach, Gold, Juno, and Sword, each name now synonymous with sacrifice and strategy. The beaches are peaceful now. Wide expanses of sand where families build sandcastles and teenagers play volleyball. But bunkers remain, concrete fortifications built by the Germans as part of the Atlantic Wall. Cemeteries hold thousands of graves, white crosses and stars of David marking where soldiers from America, Britain, Canada and other Allied nations are buried far from home. The Normandy American Cemetery, overlooking Omaha Beach, contains 9,888 graves arranged in precise curves across 70 hectares. The site is maintained by the American Battle Monuments Commission. The lawn perfectly manicured, each headstone identical. It's deeply moving, the scale of loss made visible in rows that stretch into the distance. A memorial building at the site contains maps and narratives describing the invasion, and a reflecting pool mirrors the sky, creating a space for contemplation. Nearby, the town of Saint-Mère-Église is famous for paratrooper John Steele, whose parachute caught on the church steeple during the night drop before the beach landings. He hung there for 2 hours, playing dead while fighting rage below before being captured by Germans. He later escaped and rejoined his unit. A mannequin paratrooper now hangs from the church year-round, commemorating the incident. East of Normandy, the Champagne region produces the sparkling wine that's become synonymous with celebration. Champagne, the drink, can only legally be called that if it comes from this region. Strict laws protect their designation, defining which grapes can be used: Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier. How the wine must be produced through méthode champenoise, involving secondary fermentation in the bottle, and even which villages fall within the region's boundaries. The method, developed over centuries, creates the bubbles that distinguish Champagne from other sparkling wines and gives it a complexity and finesse that imitators struggle to match. Rouen, Champagne's largest city, sits above a network of chalk cellars, some 120 kilometres of tunnels where millions of bottles age. The houses of Champagne, Moet, Chandon, Veuve Clicquot, Taittinger, Pommery and others offer tours through these underground passages, explaining the riddling process where bottles are gradually turned and tilted to collect sediment in the neck, and the disgorgement where the sediment is frozen and removed before the final cork is inserted. The cellars maintain constant cool temperatures around 12 degrees, ideal for aging, and some date back to Roman times when chalk was mined for construction. The Cathedral of Rennes, where French kings were traditionally crowned from 1027 to 1825, is a Gothic masterpiece to rival Notre Dame. Construction began in the 13th century, and the facade is covered in sculptures, over 2,300 of them, depicting saints, kings, angels, and biblical scenes. The cathedral was heavily damaged during World War I, German artillery targeting it deliberately, destroying the roof and much of the interior. But it was rebuilt, the restoration taking until the 1930s, funded by the Rockefeller Foundation, among others. Marc Chagall created new stained glass windows in 1974, modern additions to a medieval structure, their abstract blue designs contrasting with older, more traditional windows. South of Champagne, Burgundy produces wines that are, to enthusiasts, the world's finest. The region's vineyards are small, divided into plots whose boundaries were established centuries ago by monks who observed how wine from neighbouring plots tasted different despite identical grape varieties and winemaking techniques. A single hillside might contain dozens of appellations, each producing wine from the same grapes, Pinot Noir for reds and Chardonnay for whites, yet each tasting distinctly different due to subtle variations in soil, elevation, drainage, and sun exposure. The Côte d'Or. The Golden Slope runs from Dijon south to Beaune, a narrow band of limestone hillside, barely 50 kilometres long and only a few hundred metres wide in places, yet producing some of the world's most expensive wines. Names like Romanée, Conti, Chambertin and Montrachet command prices that can exceed thousands of euros per bottle, sometimes tens of thousands for rare vintages. The wines are revered not just for taste, but for terroir, the French concept that wine expresses the specific place where its grapes were grown, that limestone from this slope tastes different from limestone from that one, that east-facing and west-facing vines produce wines with distinct characters. Beaune, the wine capital of Burgundy, centres on the Hospices de Beaune, a medieval hospital founded in 1443 by Nicolas Rolin, Chancellor to the Duke of Burgundy. Its distinctive roof, covered in colourful glazed tiles arranged in geometric patterns of red, yellow, green and black, is one of Burgundy's most photographed sites. The hospital operated until 1971, treating the sick and poor for over 500 years. The building now houses a museum displaying medical instruments, religious art, and Rogier van der Weyden's Last Judgment polyptych, painted in the 15th century for the hospital's chapel. Each November, the hospices host a wine auction, selling wines made from vineyards donated to the institution over centuries by wealthy benefactors. The event, Les Trois Glorieuses, sets prices that influence the entire Burgundy market. Buyers from around the world bidding on barrels of new wine that won't be bottled for years. Southwest from Burgundy, the landscape opens toward the Atlantic, the Bordeaux region producing wines that compete with Burgundy for prestige, though in a different style. Bordeaux wines are typically blends rather than single varieties, combining Cabernet, Sauvignon, Merlot, Cabernet Franc, and other grapes in proportions that vary by estate and vintage. The region benefits from maritime influence, the Atlantic moderating temperatures and providing moisture. The Gironde estuary and its tributaries, the Garonne and Dordogne, divide the region into districts, each with its own character. The left bank, on the Gironde's western side, produces Cabernet Sauvignon dominant wines, structured and age-worthy. The right bank, dominated by Merlot, produces wines that are softer and more approachable young. The city of Bordeaux has transformed over recent decades from a somewhat sleepy port town into a vibrant modern city. The riverfront was redesigned, the old docks converted to parks and museums, trams run on tree-lined boulevards. The Place de la Bourse, an 18th century square, reflects in the Miroir d'Eau, a shallow reflecting pool covering 3,450 square metres that alternates between mirror and mist, water covering the granite surface then draining away as steam rises, creating a constantly changing public art installation that's become a popular gathering spot and playground for children. The wine estates. Called Châteaux, though many are modest farmhouses rather than castles, range from small family operations to massive industrial concerns producing hundreds of thousands of bottles annually. Château Margaux, Château Lafite Rothschild, Château Mouton Rothschild, Château Latour, Château Haut-Brion, the first growths classified in 1855, produce wines that sell for hundreds or thousands of euros per bottle. Investments as much as beverages. Lyon, at the confluence of the Rhône and Saône rivers, is France's third largest city and its gastronomic capital. The city's bouchons, traditional restaurants that originated as places where silk workers ate hearty meals, serve Lyonnaise cuisine. Meat-heavy dishes like quenelles, pike dumplings in sauce, sausages of all descriptions, and offal preparations that reflect a cuisine where nothing was wasted. Lyon takes food seriously, a city where even casual meals feel considered, where markets overflow with local produce, poultry from Bresse, cheeses from nearby Alps, and where chefs trained here, including Paul Bocuse, who defined modern French cuisine, go on to earn Michelin stars elsewhere. The old town, Vieux-Lyon, is a Renaissance quarter of narrow streets and traboules, covered passageways that cut through buildings originally used by silk workers to transport fabrics without exposing them to weather. The traboules are semi-public. Visitors can explore them during daytime hours, entering through unmarked doors and emerging from dim corridors into unexpected courtyards with spiral staircases and galleries. The old town contains over 300 traboules, creating a hidden network through the district. Above the city, the Basilica of Notre-Dame de Fourvière dominates the skyline from its hilltop perch. Built in the late 19th century after France's defeat in the Franco-Prussian War, partly as an assertion of Catholic identity, its white stone and ornate decoration make it look like a wedding cake from a distance. All decoration and no restraint. Inside, mosaics cover every surface. Gold leaf glints in the candlelight, and the overall effect is overwhelming. Decoration piled on decoration in a display of wealth and devotion that contrasts sharply with the more austere Romanesque churches elsewhere in the city. Brittany, the peninsula jutting into the Atlantic in northwestern France, maintains a distinct identity, its Celtic heritage more evident than French. The Breton language, related to Welsh and Cornish, is still spoken by some, though French dominates. The coastline is dramatic. Granite cliffs battered by Atlantic storms, pink granite near Perros-Guirec, creating beaches of unusual colour. Carnac, on the southern coast, contains the world's largest collection of megalithic standing stones, over 3,000 of them arranged in rows stretching for kilometres, erected between 4500 and 3300 BC for purposes that remain unknown despite centuries of speculation. France doesn't reveal itself quickly. It requires time, multiple visits, a willingness to sit and observe rather than rush from landmark to landmark. The pleasure is often in small moments. A perfect croissant from a neighbourhood bakery, the layers separating cleanly, the interior soft, the exterior shattering into buttery flakes. An afternoon in a village square watching old men play pétanque, the metal balls clinking as they hit, arguments over distances settled with measuring tapes and good-natured cursing. A meal that lasts 3 hours, not because the service is slow, but because each course deserves attention. Conversation flowing between bites, wine complementing food in combinations that feel inevitable once experienced. The French protect their way of life deliberately. Labour laws limit working hours to 35 per week, though many work longer. Shops close on Sundays by law in most areas. August is sacred, the month when businesses shut and families head to the coast or countryside, leaving cities quieter, more manageable. To outsiders, it can seem inefficient, even backwards, prioritising leisure over productivity. But it reflects different priorities, a belief that life should be lived, not just endured, that work exists to support life rather than the reverse. From the beaches of Normandy, where history was made, to the peaks of the Alps, where nature asserts dominance, from the lavender fields of Provence to the vineyards of Bordeaux and Burgundy, from the Châteaux of the Loire to the boulevards of Paris, from the dramatic tides of Mont-Saint-Michel to the Roman engineering at Pont de Gare, France offers landscapes and experiences that have shaped Western culture for centuries. This is a country that turned butter and cream into cuisine, grapes into philosophy, and daily life into an art form, where farmers are respected as much as chefs, where tradition and innovation coexist rather than conflict, and where the past is not something to overcome, but something to refine and carry forward, where a baguette is not just bread, but a connection to centuries of craft, where wine is not just a beverage, but the expression of place and time. France doesn't ask to be understood quickly. It asks to be savoured like a good wine, slowly, attentively, with appreciation for the layers beneath the surface, for the balance between elements, for the way time shapes flavour. Some things can't be rushed, shouldn't be rushed, and France has built an entire civilization around that principle.